A wife, a mother, and someone else's secret. Her body was found on the side of a South Florida road, a mystery that haunted detectives for more than a year. Now, a shocking twist. An arrest uncovers a web of text messages, secret DMs, and an alibi detectives say was nothing but lie after lie. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. It was the kind of thing that you can't unsee. October 28th, 2024. Several 911 calls were made to authorities in Palm Beach County, Florida. A woman bleeding from the mouth, lifeless, her own vehicle feet away, her body in the middle of the road. This is the woman who was found in the roadway as people who knew her want to remember her. Linda Campitelli. This is a video that's posted to her obituary of her just having fun with family. Linda grew up in Miami. She was a star student. She got an academic scholarship to the University of Miami. And for a decade, she worked as a registered nurse. She met her husband, who was a medical resident, and the two of them started a family. They had 2 children, and they moved north of Miami to Palm Beach County, and that's where they lived in the community of Wellington. In Linda's obituary, people remember her as someone who lived her life with gusto. So knowing all of that, how could someone who is loved by so many people and who spent her professional life caring for others end up dead like this?
On October 18, 24, at about 10:20 p.m., the sheriff's office started receiving several 911 calls about a female in the roadway in the 6000 block of Lyons Road in western Lake Worth Boynton area. That's going to be on Lyons Road between Lantana Road and High Paluxo. Callers called 911 and said there was an unresponsive female laying in the roadway near a white Chevy Tahoe.
The vehicle that police found her body near belonged to her husband. And that's how authorities pieced together that it was Linda who had lost her life. The details of her death, I'm going to warn you, they're difficult to talk about. There was a trail of blood in the roadway. She had a major cut on her head, and the back portion of her heels were worn down and disfigured, according to law enforcement. Authorities say that Linda was dragged or moved with force.
Mrs. Campitelli's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma. She was then transported to the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner's office, where a forensic examination was done. And along with that examination and the sheriff's office information that we had, the case was ruled a homicide.
Inside the car, there were stains that appeared to show that someone had been in that vehicle, and it was a person who allegedly tried to wipe blood away. Deputies wrote that the vehicle was still running. All the doors were closed. 25 feet away, they found a cell phone, and that cell phone belonged to Linda. And there was a new text message from her husband on that cell phone. It came from about an hour before. Now, Linda and her husband, they lived roughly 8 miles from where her body was found. Detectives went to Linda's house, and they say when they knocked on the door, her husband answered, and it appeared he had just woken up. And he told them that Linda left the house around 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and her plan was to go to dinner with friends. Cell phone data would show that her husband's phone was at their house during the time Linda was gone, ruling her husband out as a suspect, a very solid alibi. As detectives continued their investigation, they spoke to some close friends of Linda, and they mentioned that she might have been romantically involved with someone else, a former coworker named Rene Perez. Now, before we talk about Rene, we need to talk about what was found in the back seat of Linda's vehicle. Now, this was a Chevy Tahoe, so the back space was big enough for 2 people, according to deputies. And in that space, with the seats put down, there was an ultra-sorb medical sheet. But then beyond that, when they looked at Linda's phone, they noticed something else was there. It was no longer there when deputies arrived. There was an image on Linda's phone that showed a blanket or a tablecloth that was laid down on that medical sheet, and that blanket reportedly said, quote, "Happy birthday. Hope your birthday is out of this world." But as deputies looked at this space where they had just found Linda's body, that sheet was now gone.
So the evidence suggests that Mr. Perez and Ms. Campitelli knew each other for an extended period of time. They used to work together previously. They had an ongoing friendship.
Detectives did an extraction of Linda's iPhone, and they say it showed that she was romantically involved with Rene Perez. This is according to the roughly 25-page affidavit that we have here at Law and Crime. Now, the two communicated, Linda and Rene, often through WhatsApp, the messenger that has end-to-end encryption, which can allow people to communicate in a way that can be kept hush-hush if needed. Now, when deputies found the messages between Linda and Rene, they showed that they planned to meet up the night that Linda was killed around the time that she said she was going to dinner with friends. So here's what some of the messages said the day before, when authorities say Linda and Rene were making these plans. Linda messages Rene on WhatsApp, quote, "I love you. I feel kind of weird. I don't know what to expect tomorrow. You've never done anything like this for me before, and I feel a little nervous." Then a couple minutes later, Rene replies, "LOL, it's no big deal. Just trying to show you that I can be romantic. It probably won't be as good as what you've done for me." Then Linda says, quote, "So tomorrow at 7:30, and you're 100% sure this is okay?" And Rene replies, "Yes, ma'am, you got it. I love you so much." Then Linda replies, "Thank you. I love you so much too. Good night." Now, deputies say other messages that they found show the two regularly talked about sex and how much they loved each other, and they believe that this affair, this romantic relationship, was allegedly going on for roughly 2 years. Now, clearly, when you read that, if you're a detective, you say we need to talk to this Rene Perez person. So they were able to get Rene to come in for an interview back in 2024, right after all of this happened. And they say Rene admitted to them that, yeah, he was having an affair with Linda. And he claims this affair had been going on for 2 years. And deputies asked Rene about the WhatsApp messages with their plans to meet up on the day that Linda was found dead. Now, Rene said that he was planning to do something special for Linda's birthday because it was a couple days prior. Rene works nights at a medical center, so the plan was for him to allegedly leave work, then meet up with Linda. But he said the day before, he messaged Linda that he wasn't going to be able to make it because he said his son was sick and he couldn't go to work. He said that he did end up going to work that night, however. Now, the problem with that alibi, as we just read with you, a couple of the messages that Linda and Rene had sent back and forth, authorities say there is no proof that Rene ever sent a message, not a text message, not a WhatsApp message, saying that he wasn't going to meet up with Linda that night on the 28th. Now, you can see when you hear that, if you're a detective, some things just are not adding up in this story. And a lot of this story, a lot of this case that has been built up since that night in October of 2024 hinges on what cell phone location data shows. Now, before we get more into that, let's talk a little bit more about Rene, because he told deputies that when he canceled the romantic meetup with Linda the night before, she was very upset. Detectives say that was another red flag that he would say that, because they had looked at so many text messages, tens of thousands of text messages over the last several months between the two. And they noticed a pattern in how Rene and Linda communicated. They say when Linda was upset or unsettled about something, Rene would be overly apologetic. So now you have him claiming that Linda was very upset that he had canceled this meetup that they had planned for her birthday, but deputies say there was no evidence, no apology from Rene, beyond the fact that there was no evidence that he ever canceled that meetup, because they have all the messages allegedly that Linda and Rene had sent to each other. Now, let's talk about the cell phone location data. Rene told deputies that he shares his location on his primary phone with his wife. So when he would meet up with Linda, he would leave his primary phone behind so it wouldn't show where he was going. He says he had a secondary phone that his work would be able to reach him at, so if he was away and they needed him to come back to the medical center, they'd be able to get in touch with him. Now, on the night that he said he was at work the entire time, detectives say they have surveillance video showing Rene leaving work around 6:24 in the evening. His primary phone that tells his wife where he is, that was left behind, according to deputies. Hours later, at 11:52, Rene returned to work. Deputies say on surveillance, he goes over to a garbage can when he gets back, allegedly, and it appears he discards something. It's still unclear what he might have discarded in the garbage, according to law enforcement. Now, deputies also noticed that when Rene returned to work, they say he was wearing one type of shoe. Then, when he goes into work and comes back out a little after midnight to head home, he was wearing a different pair of shoes. And to this day, deputies say they do not know where that first pair went. Days after his police interview, detectives searched Rene's home, and that's when there was another interesting development in this case, because Rene had a new phone. Same number, but a different device. Now, Rene said that he lost his old phone and he had to go get a new one at the store. Deputies in this case, before we go on, I do need to point out, it seems that they have a lot of receipts on Rene, and not just the figurative kind. Literally, they have receipts because they say they got surveillance video from the AT&T store and they found Rene leaving with the old device in one hand and his new phone in the other. That new phone had a lot of information transferred over from the old phone, but deputies say allegedly all the messages that Rene and Linda had sent back and forth, those were with the old phone. Allegedly meaning that Rene either deleted them or he purposely didn't transfer that information over. Law enforcement in the court records that we have say that Rene's story about the phone, allegedly, that was a lie. Now, Rene's story, as you can tell, it is sketchy, to say the least. And you can see that authorities really took their time in this investigation, even with all the alleged holes in where Rene said he was the night that Linda died and all the information related to his cell phone.
During the course of that investigation that culminated yesterday, they conducted comprehensive video canvasses, interviewed countless witnesses, collected numerous pieces of forensic evidence throughout the investigation, authored more than 50 search warrants in reference to this case, and analyzed hundreds and hundreds of hours of cell phone data and did analytical work on all the cell phones that are involved.
So remember, Linda died in October of 2024, and for more than a year, law enforcement continued to hammer out this case. But then you have January 2026, and that's when it appears a major piece of evidence came in that took this case to the next level. Because in January, an analysis came back for a phone number ending in 2154. And that phone, according to law enforcement, was a burner phone, allegedly from Cricket Wireless. And deputies say they were able to link that burner phone to Rene. And they also point out that Rene, he said he had two phones, the primary and the secondary phone, but he never said he had a burner phone. Deputies found the burner had a fake name. Detectives linked the phone to Rene because he allegedly used it when he was at work. And on the day that Linda died, they say that they linked the burner's number to his car's location data. Then, between 7:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. on October 28th, deputies say that Rene's burner phone and Linda's phone were active on the AT&T wireless network, showing them in close proximity to each other, allegedly putting Rene at the scene with Linda.
The cell phone analytical work. So with technology, our investigations have changed drastically over the last 11 years. I've been part of this group, and the cell phone analytical work takes a lot of time. And there was one specific key piece of evidence that just had not been identified until recently through that analytical work. Remember that it's not, when you were working with electronics and things of that nature, there's a lot of dependencies, not just on what we can do, but what different providers give us and the timeline for which we get that information.
Deputies say they also found Linda's Apple Watch on the scene, and they say it had blood allegedly on both sides, which they believe may show that there was a violent struggle inside that vehicle.
This past week, through the investigation, on Monday, an arrest warrant was signed by a Palm Beach County judge charging Mr. Perez with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. On Tuesday, he was taken into custody by our federal partners at the United States Marshal Service in Miami. He was transported to the Palm Beach County Jail, where he is now housed here.
Rene Perez was arrested by the U.S. Marshals in Miami, who brought him back to Palm Beach County, Florida. He's been charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Here he is making his first court appearance in Palm Beach County. This is video per WFLX TV. Deputies say he has not made a statement since his arrest, and the motive for his alleged crime is not clear. Joining us now to talk more about this investigation is retired detective commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Svilar. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. It seems like Rene Perez was the suspect from the very beginning in this, just based off the story he was telling. He was allegedly in this romantic relationship with the victim, but then there were just holes in the story from the very beginning. Why do you think it took so long to make this arrest, not until 2026?
So they had to build their case against this guy. I mean, there were hours and hours of phone records that they had to get. First of all, you have to get them. So you got to write your warrants. You have to wait for the phone company to give you all this information. And then you have to piece it all together. And it could be, depending on how much communication there was. And it's not just the communication between the two. It's also tracking locations. So now you're talking about search warrant after search warrant. You're writing search warrants for cell towers. Not just one, but several cell towers, the direction the person's moving. It's forensically, it's a nightmare to go through all this stuff. And it's very time consuming without direct physical evidence or a statement or a damning video right on the spot. It takes a long time sometimes to go through all that evidence.
I mean, the probable cause document was, I think, 25 pages, that's a long one, compared to what we typically see. And it did seem really complex. They're talking about all the cell towers. And then it seems like this burner phone allegedly was what came back and showed that, like, maybe he left the primary phone behind at his workplace, but that burner phone was with Linda's phone and went in the direction where they were that night. How strong is it, though? Because a defense attorney could say, like, okay, yeah, maybe you linked this phone to him, but, like, you can't prove that he was holding the phone. Like, how does that work with building your case, where clearly you might, as a detective, be like, we think that this guy did it, but a detective or a defense attorney may argue, well, like, the phone is moving, you can't prove that he's there, though.
You can prove it with video. So there had to be some surveillance video along the lines of where the phone was moving or showing his phone moving. Here's how you do it. His phone and her phone are together. They're moving in a direction. It ends up where the girl is found. Now you see his phone moving back in a direction. Now you pick up the video of him getting out of another car or however he gets back there. The time lines up. It all has to line up. The video lines up with the motion or with the movement of the phone. And you're absolutely right. I've had more than one case where they said, well, his phone was there, but you can't prove he was there. So you prove it other ways. And that's with there's video surveillance. There's video everywhere. There's a parking lot of where he was, where the hospital was. There's on the road between where they were and where the hospital was. So that's why it's a 26-page affidavit. There's a lot of evidence in there. And you need that with circumstantial cases.
Well, how much of this case at this point is circumstantial? Because it didn't sound like they had a lot of forensic evidence from the scene. I mean, we know that she had some very, very brutal injuries when she was found. That appears to show that maybe she was dragged or, some sort of, the part about the heels is very difficult to read. But we don't hear a lot about what ties him to that Chevy Tahoe beyond the fact they were in a relationship of some kind.
Unless there's video that shows him getting out of it at some point or getting in it at some point. But the injuries, I don't know that there's much physical evidence at all. Like you said, I know that they said that he was wearing different shoes. And they believe he might have dumped some shoes. They saw him going to a dumpster on video. But, you're talking about a year and a half later. I doubt that they have those shoes because all they said is he was wearing different shoes, suggesting he probably dumped those shoes. Her injuries, there's blood spatter in the car. She's bleeding profusely in the car. One of two things happen. He either tries to throw her out of the car while the car is moving and she becomes dragged, or she tries to escape the car and gets dragged along the side and then finally behind the car. I mean, it's the dragging injuries are pretty significant, but they're saying it's blunt force trauma, which means he didn't get hit by the car. She was beat and then she was dragged.
And that's just, it's so difficult when you think of this woman and having to go through that. It's just, it's the horrific part of these cases beyond just the loss of life. His interview, it seems like, going back to that, and I know how, like, PBSO, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, how they made this look is like, from the beginning, he said he was going to be there. He had all these messages with her, but then he's like, oh, I canceled the meetup. And there was no proof that he ever canceled the meetup with her. And it just seems like from the beginning that anybody watching this would be like, this is the guy who could allegedly be responsible for this. Do you think he knew he was a suspect, like, this entire time, like a year and a half later, like that it was a surprise that the U.S. Marshals showed up to arrest him?
No, I think he probably figured something was coming along those lines. I mean, he lied day one. And then you get into the situation as an investigator and a prosecutor is, what do we know? What can we prove? If we can't prove what we know right off the bat, build your case. Is this guy a danger to the community? I don't know. This is an affair that obviously went horribly bad. But what do we know? Can we prove? Two different things. You knew it from day one. Who else would be the suspect in this situation? Her friends were telling you they're having an affair, but you have to build that case. And I had a feeling, I have a feeling he was looking over his shoulder the whole time.
And I thought it was really interesting because there's so much of this that's like the technical side of like this cell tower pinged this cell tower was there. But just looking through the messages, apparently it was the type of relationship. And we all know what, probably know couples that are like this, where she gets upset and then he's overly apologizing. And then he's telling the story of like, well, I canceled and she was really mad, but there's no evidence of an apology whatsoever. Like in your experience, like going through, like how much of a conversation do you have with the other investigators of like, this is how we think the dynamic of this relationship was like?
Well, you have to use all of the evidence you have. And again, this is going to be the conversations and maybe conversations with her friends, which she's talking to her friends about. I mean, her friends knew about the affair, so she's probably also sharing some details of it as far as the volatility of the relationship, if there is any, or something along those lines. But yeah, you sit around a table and you discuss everything, but you have to be careful. Like everybody comes up with a theory of a crime. Okay, when you're working on a crime, you come up with a theory. But what you can't do is have yourself so laser focused on your theory, you don't let other stuff in. That's why it's good to have conversations with other people, because, a lot of times if you get in a situation like that, you have to really guard against, this is my theory. This is the only acceptable thing that happened. I have to prove my theory. It doesn't work that way.
You got a lot of defense attorneys that, and I don't know how effective this argument is, but it seems like a pretty canned, regular argument of like, well, they were only zoned in on one person the entire time and they didn't look at any of the other suspects. I mean, clearly if someone's having an affair and then this person is lying to you as an investigator, like, you're probably thinking that we need to look into this person more. At the same time, like where her body was found, Lyons Road, used to live there. It's like a very busy kind of roadway. And a defense attorney could say, well, who knows how she ended up in this position? Could have just been someone passing by after he left. Like, how do you, in building a case, kind of rule all of those things out while at the same time focusing on the person who's been lying to you according to what they're saying? Like, I mean, this guy, it seems like he was doing everything in the beginning that as why an investigator would look into him as the person who potentially did it.
He freely admits that there is an affair, but then he lies about the circumstances surrounding that night. So, if he was lying about the affair from day one, I don't know. I knew her from work. I don't really know her. Then maybe you're not directly laser focused on him. But when he starts lying, admitting to the affair, but lying about his whereabouts and lying about his movement, that's where the 26-page affidavit comes in, because you're right. You have to overcome some things that the defense is going to bring up. And again, they always come up with, well, you only looked at this person. Sometimes that person's the only suspect, and it's pretty clear from the start. You don't dismiss other things, but you build your case, and as your case gets stronger and stronger, you eliminate the possibility that it is somebody else. So that's all part of that 26-page affidavit where they say it's him because of this, this, and this.
It's a figure of speech when people say, they have the receipts, but PBSO literally has the receipts, especially this guy's trip to the AT&T store, where it was just, to read this with how they blasted through some of these lies that he was allegedly saying of like, oh, I lost my phone. But there's the surveillance video of you at the AT&T store with the phone in your hand when you walk away. Like when you read through these 25 pages, and I'm sure in your career investigating murders, like you have been lied to in interviews a lot. Like how effective of a liar did it seem like allegedly Rene Perez was in trying to cover this up?
Not very. He didn't cover his tracks very well. And listen, this is modern day investigations now. All this forensic stuff, all these cameras, cell phone records. Cell phone records were big when I was doing murders. The towers were big when I was doing murders. But now with the surveillance cameras everywhere, this is the future of investigations. And it's harder and harder to try to tell a lie about your whereabouts when you're on video all the time, or you're moving with a device you never put down.
When you look at in her cause of death, this blunt force trauma, and it seems like they've been able from the technical side to say that he was there. I guess when it comes to presenting a case to a jury, like how, if you don't have the forensics that he physically like punched her or whatever it may be, like how much of that do you need compared to just putting the person there and then clearly something happened to this woman, and he was the only other person there. Like, can you get a conviction just on that?
You can. Well, no, not just on that. It's that and other things too. Like, you know that there's evidence inside that car. There's blood spatter in the car to indicate that there was some sort of violence happening in the car. There was striking, cast off, or whatever, the spatter. There was blood in the car that suggested violence happened in the car, which takes away from a defense possibility that she just simply was struck by her own car and dragged, because there's evidence that there was a beating that happened inside the car.
How strong of a case would you say this is? Like, at this point, if it just the 25 pages, which is a lot, how strong of a case, if you're from the prosecutor's side, would they feel like going into this?
Year and a half investigation, 26-page affidavit, hours and hours of communication between the two, tracking of cell phone records. I think the puzzle is pretty complete.
And I know we were talking before we were recording a bit about it's her car, and it's her husband's car. And then there's this like happy birthday blanket that was put down, but he's the one who is trying to, which like, maybe that's just more like I wasn't reading it correctly. And it's like, it's unclear, but it just seems like it's still unclear, like how he was able to get this birthday blanket down, but it was a surprise for her. And it was her vehicle, which he got in because he left in his car from. What did you just make of that part of it?
That's the strange part about it is she's not going to decorate her husband's car on her way to the affair. Now, where's the downtime? Where did that happen? Does it happen after the fact? Does he lay all these blankets down and put this up after she's already gone? Does he stage it? You have to determine, and they probably know this, when that happened. Because like we said, it's not his car, it's her car, it's her husband's car. She's not going to decorate her husband's car for her own birthday. So that may possibly have been done after.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Obviously, they have a lot of evidence at this point. It seems he is being held in jail in Palm Beach County, and we'll see what other evidence comes out as this case moves forward. Retired detective commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Sevilar. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for doing this.
Sure.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and you can also now find us on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.